Singing Dutchman Productions. Hello and welcome to Doug's Front Porch, a podcast where I get to sit down with friends, old and new, and have honest conversations. Today, I welcome Andrea Debrozsi to the front porch. A friend, yes, but also a relative, my second cousin. Andrea, welcome to the front porch.
Hello. Hi, Doug. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. It's funny. Andrea's grandmother and my grandfather were brother and sister, but they came from this huge family of like 9 children. And my grandfather and your grandmother were at the bottom. They were the 2 youngest kids out of 9. So we have all these second cousins, but some of our second cousins are like in their 80s. And then there's us that are in our 40s just because of the spread out of age. So there's only a few of my second cousins that I actually got to know. And luckily you and your brother and a handful of other second cousins I actually got to know. So I'm so glad that we're able to connect and bring you on the show.
Yeah, me too. It's funny. I don't know that much about my Nana. So I called it Nana, about Nana's family. So I didn't I think I knew that she had a lot of brothers and sisters. And of course I knew that your grandfather was her brother. But other than your dad and you and your brother, I really don't know a whole lot about that side of my family. So
yeah, I get it. When you have big families like that, and we'll talk later, but you don't live in the same area where all of the Maidenfords live. But I have I do want to share this with you at the beginning of the conversation. I have a lot of very fond memories of your grandmother. She used to come and visit the farm, not regularly, but often. Like in the summer, she would often come and get sweet corn from us, or just come and visit, especially if my grandparents were there as well. And it was she came for Thanksgiving once or twice as well. And it was just, I always enjoyed spending time with your grandmother. She always made me laugh. It was just, I have very fond memories of her. So I wanted to tell you that. She's been gone a couple of years now. But I have great memories of your grandmother, Betty, for sure.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. That's sweet to hear.
Well, let's talk a little bit. So tell our listeners a little bit about where you grew up. I already mentioned you have a brother, and you started in Pennsylvania, but eventually you made a move. Talk a little bit about that.
So my father is from Reading, Pennsylvania, and my mother is from Springfield, Ohio. And my mother moved to Reading for a job. And actually met my dad at a softball game because they were going to a Polish festival, and my dad's name, which was Gonkowski, was on the back of his softball jersey. And my mom's and her friend said, "Oh, well, that guy will know where the Polish festival is," which is terrible, right? But so that's how they met. So they met and then got married and had my brother and I. And then my mom, they decided that they wanted to move back to Ohio, where my mom's family is from and where all of my mom's brothers and sisters and everything are, and her parents. So I moved back when I was 6 maybe. So I didn't live in Pennsylvania very long. I do have really great memories from Pennsylvania. And then I've lived here pretty much ever since. We lived, north of Cincinnati. And I went to school there. My brother and I went to school there and all of that. And then I went to BGSU for undergrad. I kind of worked some random jobs. And then I always knew that I wanted to do something service related for my job. I always knew that I wanted to do something that was going to be helpful to people. I didn't know what the heck that was. And so I ended up doing a year of Americorps service.
Okay.
In Chicago.
Tell everybody what Americorps is, because I'm sure there's people out there that you heard say that and they're like, "What's that?"
Oh yeah, you're right. So I always say that it's the Peace Corps, if people know what the Peace Corps is, but it's all domestic. So basically you go and do a year of volunteer service, and there's thousands of programs all over the country, and you can kind of pick which ones speak to you and apply. And they basically pay you enough so you don't like starve to death, because technically you're a volunteer, right? So the program that I did, I worked on the south side of Chicago. I actually worked at the University of Chicago. And there was a program there called the Neighborhood Schools Program. And they hired students to be tutors in all these schools on the south side. And so I was in charge, or me and a couple of other people were in charge of like running that program essentially.
You have I have like a ton of questions now I didn't know you did that. So you South side of Chicago. I've never been to the South side of Chicago, but I have this image in my mind of what the South side of Chicago is. And here comes this young, fresh out of college white girl from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Oh yeah.
So what was that like? What was the culture shock? Did the kids that you were working with, did they respect you? How did you connect with them? There's tons of questions for you to kind of tackle, but this is interesting.
So, okay. So yes, all of those things. So, I didn't know what the heck I was like getting into. I didn't know what I was doing. I had all these like naive ideas. I was like 25. It was, so I worked at the University of Chicago, which is a very affluent university. And I lived in Hyde Park, which is like literally Barack Obama was my neighbor. Like he lived like 2 blocks down from me. And I was living there when he declared his candidacy for president. So it was like a very exciting time. So I lived in kind of an affluent, I don't want to say affluent neighborhood, but it was not a rough neighborhood. And this people that I worked with were mostly like University of Chicago students.
Okay.
But the staff was very aware that we were like super white kids from, my roommate was from Wisconsin, we had people from Michigan, I was from Ohio, like, we didn't know like kind of what we were doing. So one of my jobs was to go into all these schools and make sure that the tutors were like doing okay, that, that they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. And it was a real shock to me. I had never seen schools like that. Some of the schools like that. Now, some of these schools were amazing. Like some of the schools were great. But some of the schools, I was like, you guys don't have like toilet paper in the bathroom. Like it was crazy to me. And it made me, I just didn't realize that was a thing. Because I grew up, we went to private school because our public schools were not that great. And my parents believed in private education or in Catholic education. And so I went to a Catholic school and I was like the scholarship kid, like we didn't have a ton of money. But I had never seen anything like that. And it was really like an introduction to just absolute inequality. And so it was hard. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself. I feel like I learned what I didn't know. But I learned a lot that year. And that's actually where I decided that I wanted to be a school counselor. Because I worked.
When you did your undergraduate, was in education? Were you thinking at some point of being a teacher or?
So it's funny, when I first graduated from high school, I was like, oh yeah, I had this amazing social studies teacher. And I was like, I'm going to be Miss Michelson. Like, that's what I'm going to do. And then I wasn't really sure, And I ended up changing my major in college, like 3 times, because I was undecided. And then I was English. I actually had an English major for like 2 or 3 years. And then I had a sociology minor. And I ended up flip-flopping those because I loved my sociology classes. So I actually have a sociology degree with an English minor, which if I had to go back and do it again, I would do it differently. I feel like a lot of people would. I would do it differently. But yeah, so like I was saying before, I always knew that what I wanted to do with my life was going to be service in some way, right? And I've always...
Can I ask, where do you think that comes from? Where'd you get that?
So I think a lot of it is honestly from my Catholic education. They were big on service, and we did a lot of like retreats and just volunteer experiences. I think some of it is just who I am, like my personality, my I'm somebody who, like, I have a lot of empathy and I just really want to help wherever I can. And so that combined with like how much I value education, which I think definitely comes from my mother. And I saw how much my mother sacrificed and my father sacrificed to send us to the best school that they could. And my mom always, okay, I won't like get too much off the track here. But yeah, so I worked with school counselors when I was doing when I was at the University of Chicago, because they were often like my point of contact. And I was like, I literally can remember standing in my bedroom in Chicago and being like, oh, that's what I should do. I should be a school counselor. I didn't know like what you had to do to be a school counselor. I didn't know what any of that meant. So I literally like Googled it. I was like, what do you have to do to be a school counselor? Turns out you have to have a master's degree. So I was like, okay. And I applied for some jobs in Chicago and I didn't get any of them because I didn't know if I wanted to stay or not or come home. But I ended up coming home and I just got like a little temp job that ended up being what I worked all through graduate school. And I lived with my mom and I went to Xavier University and got my, master's in school counseling. And here we are.
That's a perfect transition because I definitely wanted to talk about I knew you were a guidance counselor and, I'm a teacher, so I work with guidance counselors, I walk past their offices on a daily basis. I might not talk to them every day, but I think a lot of people have in their mind, people that aren't in education have in their mind what a guidance counselor was for them. Yeah. And, when we look at like historically the role of the guidance counselor, I think to my high school guidance counselor who I might have talked to twice maybe in my high school career, and both times were around getting close to graduate and future plans, blah blah blah. But that is not what a guidance counselor does today. So I know that not everyone in the listening audience is in education. So if you had to tell somebody that knows nothing about education what your job is you're at a high school, correct?
Yes.
So a high school guidance counselor, what do you say to them?
So what I tell people, well, it's funny that you talk about, when you were a counselor, because that's something that we talked about in my graduate program, because I graduated from high school 21 years ago, but even then, like even that recently, my guidance counselor so we're school counselors.
Correct. Yeah. I'm sorry. You're right.
But she was a guidance counselor and she was like in the van, like we had like a trailer and she like lived in the trailer and we never saw her. So, and that was like the experience of a lot of people. Or like you didn't have one at all, or they weren't helpful or whatever. So what I do is I try to, I'm trying to think, try to eliminate as many barriers for kids to education as possible. So we social and emotional things. So if a kid just, need something, or they are having a bad day, or they're having a conflict with someone, those are things that we can help with. We help a lot with preparation for what your next step is. So is that, am I going to go to college? Am I going to join the workforce? Am I going to go into the military? We talk to kids as soon as possible about like, hey, like, what are you thinking? And we try to get them to take the classes that we offer that would be most helpful to them. And things like that. We deal a lot with academics too, making sure that kids are on track for where they should be. And if they're not coming to school or they're struggling in their classes, like, hey, what's going on? Like, what can we do? I work with parents a ton. So, we help to remove those barriers. We're also kind of like a liaison between like teachers and administrators and families and kids. So we do a lot of things.
You do. And you mentioned something that right away I was hoping you kind of would, but you talked about how you deal with emotional and what was the other word you used?
Social and emotional.
Social and emotional issues. So I'm going to ask you, when you graduated with your degree and you're ready to go become a guidance counselor, were you ready for what you were walking into?
No, absolutely not. were you ready as a first year teacher to be?
That's a big fat no.
I mean, like I look back on this, so this will be year 11, and I look back on year 1 and I'm like, oh girl, like that you were but I've learned a lot and I've grown so much. And now things that like freaked me out, like one of my professors, he would do this exercise called called Who's Gonna Take the Call. And so he would have a cell phone and he would leave it in the room, and he would go into another room and he would pretend to be a parent and call. And so, because that's something you have to deal with as a counselor, like you're just gonna get a call from a parent and you have no idea what's coming, right? And it was like the most terrifying thing. Nobody wanted to do it. Everybody was like so freaked out. It's not real, you know, like, and we're all learning together, but we were, you know, just totally freaked out by that. And now I'm like, oh, no big deal. Like, absolutely. Like whatever a parent is calling for is, you know.
Right. But okay. I have dealt with those phone calls from parents that are, you know, the ones that are great, you know, when the parents like, oh, you're doing such a wonderful job. My daughter loves you, blah, blah, blah. Those are great. But then you get the ones that you pick up the phone and you're like, you could tell before they even start talking, here it comes. And oh my gosh. So how do you deal with that? You got a parent that's irate. They think the school district is you know, treating their daughter or son incorrectly, XYZ. So, and there you are, and you pick up the phone. How do you deal with that parent?
So I use my counseling skills. People just want to be heard a lot of the time. You know, they are upset about something, and they just want you to hear their complaint. They just want a place to vent. And so, you know, I do that as much as possible. Excuse me. And I say, you know what? Yes, that isn't, you know, that must have been really hard. Or yes, I totally understand why that's upsetting you. Let me explain what's going on. Or, you know, sometimes they don't have, you know, they're wrong. Sometimes parents are wrong. You know, and I have to give them more information about something, or, you know, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that's happening to your child. This is what I can do to help you. You know, and so using my counseling skills was like my listening skills and my counseling skills is really, really helpful. And like I said, most people just want to be heard. I mean, they want a resolution, but they also just really want you to listen to them. And so we are uniquely qualified to do that as counselors. So I don't have very many phone calls with parents where it doesn't end pleasantly.
Well,
they don't always, I can't always give them exactly what they want, but I can at least explain to them like why, and I can show them that I am on the side of their child.
Well, that has to say a lot about what it does. I shouldn't say has to. It says a lot about you as a counselor, because I know that I've been in phone calls with an administrator in the room and a counselor, and I as a teacher rep, and those phone calls haven't always ended that way. I mean, it's hard. It's a really fine line, and that's where I think a lot of people in that are critical of schools today, they don't see what we're dealing with on all levels. Can you talk a little about the district that you work for? What's it like? Is it a small district, a big district, affluent, poor?
So I work for a district that is, it's fairly small. We only have one high school, one middle school, and then 5 or 6 elementary schools. We're in Alexandria, Kentucky. So we are like, that's Northern Kentucky. But it is sort of, they say in Alexandria, they say it's where the city meets the country. So, I've got kids that come to school in like their boots, their work boots, you know, and their big trucks. And then I've got kids that live in the suburbs. We are not diverse, racially or ethnically diverse at all. It's mostly white. But we are very socioeconomically diverse. We have a lot of kids that I think it's like, I shouldn't say a lot, but I think it's like 30 to 40% of our kids are on free and reduced lunch, which is a measure that the government uses, whether or not they live under the poverty line. And so we have a lot of kids that are poor. And but then we have kids that are very wealthy. So we run the gamut that way. But we have a lot of resources. So what I love about my school, lots of things I love about my school, but one of the things I love about my school is that we really have like something for everybody. So like we have an amazing drama program and an amazing band, and we have a really amazing agriculture program, and our Future Farmers of America program is really big. We also have a huge tech school, so kids can go and learn welding and, you know, electrical and all that kind of stuff. So we're small but like mighty, I guess. Like we have a lot of things. We have, you know, we offer 20 AP classes and you know, this. So yeah, so that's my
all
little
right.
district.
What's the toughest part of your job? Go.
All the things that are not that don't involve children, don't involve the kids. So like having to be in charge of testing and all these kind of like ancillary kind of ridiculous things that we shouldn't have to deal with. If all I had to do was work with the kids and work with their parents, it would be, I don't want to say a breeze, but it would be so much easier. It's all the noise. It's all the other things that we have to deal with, paperwork and all that kind of stuff.
Amen to that. All right. What's one thing you love about your job?
Oh my God, the kids. I was like, people talk about, oh, I'm going to go work at central office, or I'm going to be an administrator, I'm going to do this. I'm like, no, like I could never work in a job that I wasn't like, I couldn't be directly with the kids. And I don't know if you wanted to talk about this, but that's what made COVID so hard.
Well, what do you mean? But go ahead, say it.
So March 13th, when everything shut down. And I had to try to be a school counselor from my living room. And it was like the worst because I'm a people person. I need my coworkers. I need my kids. And trying to do all that from my computer was just awful. I absolutely hated it because what makes having to deal with all the other junk worth it is being able to be with the kids and having relationships with them and talking to them every day. And so we couldn't really do that. And it was really, really hard. And then all last year, my district, I think we did a really great job, but we made some really hard decisions about how we were going to do things that made it hard for us as adults. So like we were virtual for 2 weeks, and then we were hybrid, and then the governor shut us down and we had to be all virtual for 6 weeks. And then we were hybrid. It was just like, and it was awful. Like nobody could get a foothold. The kids were like, what the heck is going on? Like it was just really bad. And it was really hard to try to build relationships with any of the kids. The kids would just like disappear. I mean, like we knew where they were, but like they're not coming onto their Zoom meetings. Like we did all kinds of home visits. It was just, and I just wasn't able to do the part of my job that I enjoy, that I think I'm the best at, which is building the relationships with them. And so that was really tough. So like now this year, we're all together, we're all masked up, but everybody's back. And so I have a mixed feelings about all of that, but I am really glad to see them all every day.
Yeah. Boy, I'm sitting here nodding the whole time because, you know, everything that you say is almost mirrors exactly what I went through last year and what my wife went through last year as a teacher too. And yeah, I think it's really difficult for a lot of people to understand what that was like. And not that we're looking for sympathy or anything like that, but just, it was.
I mean, I want a little sympathy, Doug.
Oh no, you're right. Yeah, that'd be nice. A nice pat on the back every once in a while is nice, isn't it?
Like, just tell me I did a good job. Like, that's all.
Hey, Andrea, you did a good job last year.
Thanks, Doug. You know what? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, as I was in my basement with puppets trying to teach German with two puppets on my hands, you know, over Zoom.
Isn't your wife an art teacher?
Yes.
Oh my.
So when we were completely virtual for the entire month of November and December up until Christmas break. We went back in person after the new year.
Yeah.
Because we had a pretty bad spike in cases here. And at one point we had like 400 people in our district quarantined. So, I mean, it was like, there was, how are we going to physically run the buildings? Yeah. So every morning our kitchen table turned into an art studio. And our basement turned into a virtual German and history classroom. But yeah, my wife would just lay out, there'd be paints here and there'd be pastels here and there'd be drawing material here. And we bought this special like arm for her camera so that for her phone that she could turn into a camera. And it was like NASA Command Central, but then with all of this like all these art supplies. And I took tons of photos just for purposes to remember, 10 years from now, to think about, look at what we did for 8 weeks or something like that. But like you said, there'd be days where little Billy'd be there in class. The next day, boof, Billy wasn't there. And then we'd go like 5 days, whatever. Anybody know anything about Billy? And then like 2 weeks later, Billy just show up and like nothing ever happened. Like he was never gone. It was crazy. Well, that's great. Enough talking shop. I want to transition to something that's a little more difficult to talk about but I want to talk about it. You and I share another thing in common. We both lost a parent to cancer at young ages. I mean, I was 26 when my mom died of uterine cancer. Your dad just passed away a couple of years ago.
4 years.
4 years ago. And I can't believe it's been that long. Holy cow.
I know, right?
No, right. Well, it's kind of weird because tonight we're recording this in the day that the anniversary of my mom's death, and that's 15 years now. And I still can't fathom those numbers. And like you said, your dad 4 years ago. So I don't even know how to talk about this because my brother and I don't even really talk about this, like this shared experience that we have. It's just, we know that it happened. We went through it and we never reflect upon it other than like remembering, good things about our mom or, oh, we have this recipe or whatever. And, we do this at Christmas because that's what mom always did. But I've never truly had the opportunity to talk to somebody that was necessarily in the same, went through the same battle, whatever you want to say, experience that I did. Yeah. So I'm going to throw it out there. What I don't even know. Like, what do you want to say? Like, what can we say about this?
So, it really sucks. So it was really complicated for me because my dad and I kind of had a complicated relationship. I'm super, super close with my mom, and my dad was super, super close with my brother. And I think he struggled to figure out how to be close to me. My parents got divorced when I was like in high school, like late high school, early college. They separated and got divorced. And I was really angry with my dad for a long time. And we had patched all those things up. But he was living in Indiana and I was living here in Ohio, and we would talk we would talk fairly often. We would go to Reds games. That was like our big thing. I feel like that was a way that like dad could like relate to me, and then we got together for my brother's graduation he got an associate's degree in computer science. And so we got together to like go out and celebrate his his graduation. And I noticed that my dad was like really thin, like looked really thin. And I was like, Dad, like, are you okay? And he was like, oh yeah. He's like, I went to went to the hospital or I went to the doctor and it's fine. Like, I don't know. It's fine. I'm like, oh, okay. And Dad was like the kind of guy that like he would call me and he'd be like, oh yeah, well I had knee surgery. And I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean you had knee surgery? Like, you supposed to...
That is the Pennsylvania Dutch side and him coming out.
Is it? Okay.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's sometimes when those types of things, like if I think about my Pennsylvania Dutch families, they wouldn't even bring it up at all. Like, like grandpa would go in and get a pacemaker and you'd never know it. And then like 2 years later, he'd be like, well, I got to go get my pacemaker checked out. I'd be like, what? You have a pacemaker? Like, I don't know what the deal is with but anyway, okay, I'm sorry. I digress.
Okay, well, that's good to know. Like, I'm glad. I'm like, okay, it's like a Pennsylvania Dutch thing. Okay.
I'll chalk it up to that. We'll just chalk it up to that.
Yeah, no, I'm all for that. So, I was like, okay, well then, so that was like May. And then, it just all happened really fast. So he was like having these like terrible night sweats and not being able to sleep, and he's losing all this weight and, we don't know what's going on. He's going back and forth to the doctor, all these things, blah, blah, blah. So finally, and his doctor was like here in Cincinnati and blah, blah, blah. So we ended up I took him to the hospital and they admitted him and they did this like full on like history, right? Everything. They're looking at all these things. So finally they're like, we had an oncologist like that came it was all a blur. So my dad he'd had ulcerative colitis like his whole life. So kind of like Crohn's disease-esque, if people know what that is. So he'd been on this particular drug for like 20 some years, 25 years, something like that. Like I can remember he had this like crazy, in fact, it was my brother's birthday yesterday. And my mom and my brother and I were all talking about this. I can remember my dad had literally like a cardboard box of like drugs that he took. And he had to like write them all down on a pad and keep them all. So because his disease was so complicated, he had all these different things he had to take. Well, one of those drugs turns out, and actually I think they knew this at the time, that one of the possible side effects is that it can cause lymphoma. Yeah. But if he hadn't taken so he got diagnosed with lymphoma. And I was like, what the heck? Like my dad has cancer? Like what? Like what? And it was like June 6th because it was D-Day. And dad was like, yep, it's D-Day. And I was like, Dad, really? Okay. So I called my brother, and because I was there at the hospital by myself, I called my brother. He came, and then the doctor asked, dad wanted to know, like, well, how long do I have? Which I was like, I don't want to know. Like, I don't think I want to know that.
Yeah.
And he said like a year. And so that was really difficult, of course. So basically that was like June 6th, and we were in the hospital until he passed away, which was July 29th. So it was very fast. He was like, I want to try and fight it. I want to try and do whatever I can. So he was basically in the hospital that whole time. He went home for about a week. And my mom and I, now, of course, he and my mom are divorced. But my mom, was like, okay, because Rose is like, I'm going to manage this. Like whatever's happening, like I'm going to like take care of it, and I'm going to figure out what's going on. And I'm going to do it. And she did it for my dad, but she mostly did it for me and my brother, because I was like, what the, like, I just could not, I had like a really hard time functioning. So we went and like made him a week's worth of meals, because when you're on chemo, like you're not supposed to be like, not supposed to be exposed to the outside world because you're immunocompromised, all that kind of stuff. And then there was one day that we couldn't get a hold of him. And because he, like, every day one of us would talk to him to make sure like he was okay, because he was at home by himself. Nobody could get a hold of him. So I was like, well, I'm just going out there. And it was like a 45-minute drive. And I was like, well, I'm just going to see like what's going on. Well, he was so sick, he could barely come to the door. So I rushed him to the hospital. And this is like typical Tom. We're in the car, I'm driving. He's like sick as a dog. And he's like telling me what lane to be in on the road. He's like, no, you need to get over. I'm like, will you just let me drive? Like, oh my gosh. Anyway, so then from there on, he was in the hospital, and that was pretty much it. It was very, very fast. I think he did 2 rounds of chemo, and like his chemo was like 48 hours worth of chemo. Like it was hard. It was like really hardcore. But there were some really, like, it's weird because all that was terrible and awful. But there were like some really bright spots too. So pretty much my mom like organized everybody that had ever known, like all of family, friends, and her family members who all still loved my dad. Everybody came to visit. He really wanted to see your dad.
Yeah.
And because they were really close and good friends. And so we surprised them. We surprised him on his birthday. And your dad came out with dad's sister, my Annie Lane. And dad was like just beside himself. He was so excited to see your dad.
It's special if you can get my dad off the farm for any length of time. And I remember when all that was going down, and dad had filled me in that your dad was not doing well, and he was going to Cincinnati. I said, "You're going to Cincinnati, Pop?" And he's like, "Yeah, Lane's driving. It'll be fine." But that was as important as it was for your dad. It was very important for my dad too.
Yeah.
that trip.
Yeah.
From your point of view, what was the toughest aspect of that whole journey? I've thought a lot about this from my own personal experience. Like your dad survived almost a year, you said, from diagnosis till the time that he passed.
Oh no, it was like
no, it was
no, it was 2 months.
That's right.
It was
That's
the same year. Yeah.
So it was this. So again, this is almost similar. Like we got the strong diagnosis for my mom around Memorial Day, and in fact, she was still driving. We went to a Memorial Day picnic, and she drove. I mean, I remember that. And then by August, she passed away. So she survived. We did one round of chemo. The chemo did absolutely well. It didn't do anything positive, that's for sure. It didn't.
Yeah.
It didn't great. And then till the beginning of August. Well, those last 2 weeks were really bad. But so it's again, it was just like for me, it was the same kind of thing. Like I got this call, like mom has cancer, and it's like stage 4. And then you go through, as a counselor, all this stuff, you go through all the phases of grief. Like watch the Scrubs episode about this, and it's like, oh, anger and denial and then acceptance and all that stuff. Well, I went through all those in about a couple of days because there was no time not to, in a sense. And just like you, it was this, I don't know. I've never, like I said, I've never really talked to anybody about any of this stuff because maybe you're in the same boat. I don't know. Maybe you don't feel this way, but unless you've lived it, it's hard to talk to somebody about this. I mean, someone can empathize with you, of course, and sympathize with you, but at the same time, unless you've walked that road yourself, you just don't make the same connection, I guess, or whatever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like my brother and I don't really talk about it either. I think it hit my brother in a totally different way than it hit me. It was just like that summer I was like in a daze. Like I can remember, like I would go to the hospital every single day. And my mom had like set up a schedule of like guests, like people that were coming in to see him. Yeah. So we got to spend a lot of really good time with him. But like other than that, like I just remember like laying on the couch, like rewatching Gilmore Girls for like the 700th time and like playing Candy Crush on my phone. And like, that's all, it's like, that's all I could do. And it was weird because like, I am a very like outgoing person. I thrive on like, support from my friends. Like I always want to talk to people and, and be social. And that was not the case, like at all. Like, I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk to you. I didn't have the energy for any of that. So it was kind of isolating because like you said, like nobody else is, unfortunately, I have friends that have lost parents, so they kind of understood. And I have really supportive friends, but it was just me and mom and Brian, for a lot of it. Yeah. And my husband, I will say my husband was incredibly supportive, and he would go to the hospital even when I wasn't there and hang out with my dad and help him to the bathroom and things like that. So, but yeah, it was, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was surreal.
You're right. Because I think about I didn't live, mom was never in the hospital. Like we had her on hospice at the farmhouse. We turned the one back room into essentially her bedroom. She had a hospital bed in there. And then we had a hospice nurse that was coming in and taking care of all the medicine and all that stuff. But the very last time I saw her, I was living 2.5 hours away. So I couldn't go every day. And I wanted to, but it just, and the last time I went down to the farm, I was sitting there with her, and I knew this would probably be the last time that I would see her. And I didn't know what to talk to her about. I'm sitting there, and I came into the room, and she was there in the bed, and she was with it that day. Because some days I called often, but there were some days she couldn't even talk on the phone. Like you talk to her and it would last like 30 seconds, and she didn't have the strength, or she couldn't think properly or clearly. And that last day I was sitting there with her, I was in the rocking chair right next to her bed, and I just sat there like, what do you say? What can you say? And I'll never forget this. She turned to me and she says, well, did you drive all this way to just sit here, or do you want to talk to me a little bit today? And she got real clear for for that split second. And that sticks with me. So, and I was like, then I really felt bad. I was like, yeah, of course I want to talk to your mom, but I didn't know what the hell to talk about. Like,
because
what do you say?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, do you address the elephant in the room and talk about like, this is what's going on in my life right now, or like,
right.
You know, I apologized to my dad because I had told him that I would bring him a steak, that I would bring him like a steak dinner because that was like one of his favorite things. And I don't cook. Like I can cook, like I can feed myself, but I'm not the chef. That's my husband. And so my husband had to work and he didn't like, it wasn't going to work out. And dad just like, he was doing okay. And then all of a sudden he was not okay. And I was like, Dad, I'm really sorry that I didn't get to make you a steak dinner. I really feel bad. And he was like, it's okay. And I was like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What the heck, you know? So
yeah.
So I was going to the hospital all the time, whatever. And then my mom and I were together running some errand, doing something. And I got a call and they were like, you need to come to the hospital. And I was like, oh, I'm on my way. Like I'm right here. And they were like, okay. And then I got there and it was like the resident or whoever it was. And because my dad had been like, my dad wanted to fight and he wanted to do everything he could do. And I was his power of attorney, which, I am not my mother's power of attorney for this reason. But he wanted to fight. And it was like rapidly becoming clear that like, this wasn't really doing anything. And my mom kept saying, he needs hospice. He just needs to be in hospice. We need to just do hospice. And I was like, Mom, this is what he wants. I have to do what he wants. So that was like some conflict, which was like, this is not what we need to be dealing with right now. Yeah. But anyway, so got the call from the hospital and went in. It was like the resident or whoever it was. And dad's oncologist was like, oh, we want to do like a bone marrow test or whatever. And the resident was a very kind man. I'll never forget. And he said, I know what's happening. He was like, your dad's organs are shutting down. Like he's going to die soon. And I don't remember his exact words, but he was like very kind. And I think he was like afraid to say it to me. And for me, I was like, oh, thank God. Like it's somebody to tell me it's time to let go now. Yeah. Because we were holding on for so long. It felt like so long. It wasn't really so long, but it felt like a million years. And so in a way it was like, okay, now I know what's happening and what we need to do. And so that was like in the morning. And then we stayed with him all day. My brother was there. I was there. My mom was there. And then they said we left about 8:00. And we were like, hey, we're going to come back in the morning. Cause we were like, we've been here all day. And the nurses were like, yeah, like it'll, he'll make it to tomorrow. Like he'll be, he'll still be here tomorrow. And then he passed that night at like 2 a.m. I got the phone call. So, whew.
Yeah. I'll tell you.
Yeah. Well, I didn't realize that it was that fast for your mom too.
Just a couple months from Memorial Day to August 15th. That's it.
Not much more than my dad, really.
No, right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, Andrea, I appreciate you. I mean, like I said, I've never talked to anybody about this. Of course I confide with things in my wife, but my wife never went through this.
Yeah.
She's lost a grandparent to cancer, but I'm going to say it. It's totally different when you're, X amount of years old and you're losing your parent. And I know there's a lot of people that have lost parents at young ages, but to be able to talk to somebody that has some shared experiences is important. And maybe there are listeners out there listening to this that maybe went through that same thing. I don't know. But thanks for, I hope not either. No, right. Yeah. Right. How about it? Well, let's turn to one last topic that's totally different. Okay. Your husband, who I've never met, but I really, really want to.
Yeah.
Make sure that I have this correct. He owns a pizza restaurant.
Yeah.
Okay. So talk about that. What's it like to be the wife of a restaurant owner? And give a shout out. What's the name of his restaurant?
So because it's Fireside Pizza in Walnut Hills. It's in the oldest firehouse in Ohio. So my husband has worked in the restaurant industry for like 15, 20 years. He has an English degree from Miami University. He's an incredibly intelligent guy, but he has a very, very high motor. He cannot, like, there's no way he could never work at a desk job. Like, he would go insane. And he's very, very good at connecting with people. And so he's just like uniquely qualified to work in the restaurant industry. So he's worked in the restaurant industry for like 15 years, and he started working for this guy named Elias Leisering, who owns Eli's Barbecue, which if you are in Cincinnati or you know Cincinnati, that is like the spot for barbecue. So Sam started working for him, and Elias owned all these other properties, all these other businesses. And so Elias was like the idea guy, but Sam is like the boots on the ground guy. And so Elias would say, hey, Sam, I need you to go fix like this restaurant. Like, this restaurant's not making money. It's not doing well, whatever. I need you to like fix it. And Sam was like, hell yeah, like that's my jam, like whatever. So one of the places that Elias sent him was Fireside. And he was like, yeah, I'm just going to be here for like a couple months, whatever. Well, no. Lies. Turns out he really liked it. He turned the place around. He just tightened everything up. He redecorated the whole inside. He just really sort of transformed the whole place. It's not total, I shouldn't say transformed, but he improved it quite a bit. And I actually, and he'd always had the dream, like he talked about like, oh, one day I'm going to own my own restaurant. And that like struck fear in my heart, Doug, because I am not a risk taker. I do not take risks. I don't like it. It makes me anxious and nervous. I don't like, no, I'm not, that's not me at all. That is my husband though. My husband will like jump off a cliff, like, yeah, let's do it. Like totally different. Right. So I actually had taken a group of students to Italy. Me and a couple of my colleagues had taken a group of students to Italy. So I was gone for a week. And I came back, and literally my husband picked me up from the airport and he said, I think I'm going to buy Fireside. And I was like, what? Hold on. I was like, well, we should probably like, I don't know, like talk about that or like what that's going to look like. And he said, okay, well, let's talk about it. And I was like, babe, I don't know like what day it is. Like, can we just hold on for a minute? And so he just like took off. So he wrote his own business plan. He did tons of research. He has a lot of friends in the restaurant industry. So he's meeting with all of those people, talking to them. And he raised the money himself. We put in some of our own money. We actually took a second mortgage on our home. But I was like, we're not going to lose the house, right? Like, that's the only thing. I'm like, we're still going to have our house. And he was like, yeah, we're not, so he did it in the most risk averse way possible. Only for me. He would have done it in a completely different way, but God love him. He did it in a very risk averse way, mostly for me. And so we bought the restaurant in October of 2019, 6 months before the pandemic. Yay! But because my husband is who he is, and he is an incredible, incredible restaurant operator, incredibly smart, he steered that restaurant through it. And thankfully we owned a pizza restaurant and not like a fine dining restaurant, because it was easy to sort of pivot to carry out and delivery. So it was rough. It was very rough. It was very scary. We knew that I would have a job, but we weren't really sure what was going to happen. But with some government loans and some, just tons and tons of hard work on his part, we made it through. And now he owns half of the building. And so we're doing okay.
Well, I have to say that I know he's on Facebook. He's probably on other social media things, but Fireside Pizza, based out of Cincinnati. Check him out. The last time I was on that website, I was sitting with my good friend whose wife is originally from Cincinnati, but lives now, and they got married and they live here in central Pennsylvania. Yeah. And we were just happened to like browse his menu, and his menu of pizzas is so creative. And like they were like, I'd read one and I'd be like, oh man, I really want to try that. And then I'd scroll down to the next one. I'd be like, oh man, that one looks even better. Like, it just was like one after another. I was like, this is insanely good stuff on paper. And there were images, of course. I was like, oh, it looks even better when you look at a picture of it. So, kudos to your husband for, I think he seems to, and this is totally from my perspective, never having met him, never been to the restaurant. Yeah. He's also the type of person that it seems like is able to think outside the proverbial box. And like, 1,000%. We're not just throwing sausage on a pizza and saying, here's your pizza.
One of his favorite things to do is collaborate with other chefs. So one of our most popular, I shouldn't say jury is out about like how much I'm allowed to say it's mine. So his his restaurant, one of his most popular things is we actually did a crab Rangoon pizza. And that sells out every single time. He can barely keep it in, because we have really good friends that own a really amazing, our favorite like upscale Chinese place. And we collaborate with them. And so they provide us, with the crab Rangoon filling. But we can't keep that one like in stock. Like when he has it, he's like, it's for the weekend. This is it. But yeah, he really loves to collaborate with other chefs and be creative in that way. There's a guy who owns a place called Boomtown Biscuits and Whiskey. And they did like a brunch biscuit pizza, which when you say that, you're like, that sounds gross. Yeah. But no, it was like amazing. When you read like the description of it, you're like, oh yeah, like that sounds so good. So that's one of his favorite things to do is collaborate with other chefs. And one of the chefs at the restaurant is like he went to culinary school. He's a, trained chef. And so he has, and several of his employees are just really creative that way. And he lets them, have that freedom. And he's like, yeah, pitch it to me, and so lots of great things come out that way. Right now, my favorite pizza of all time is on right now. It's the elote pizza, which is like Mexican street corn. So it's like a crema base, mixed cheese, grilled sweet corn with cojita cheese, and I don't know, a bunch of other really good stuff. But that's like my favorite, and it's on right now.
Well, the one that I saw on the menu that had me drooling was his Ghetto Pizza that he had. And holy cow, that looked that was one that I was like, I could drive to Cincinnati right now, 8 hours, whatever, one way, just to try that because it looked so good.
It's like Scrapple.
Yeah, it is like Scrapple. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh man. So I'll put a link in the show notes to Fireside Pizza so you guys can all check that out. And if you're ever in the greater Cincinnati area, well then stop by and taste some of these delicious pizzas. Andrea, as you know, we wrap up every interview with 10 quick questions for all my guests. And I'm super excited to hear what you have to say about some of these questions. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
Super. Here we go. Ready. Number one, what is your morning drink of choice?
I drink either a Diet Coke or a sparkling water.
Are you a coffee person at all?
I am not a coffee person. I am too stubborn to be a coffee person, Doug, because it's like an acquired taste, and I like don't have the patience. I just think it's gross.
So are you the person that has the diet soda on their desk all day long too?
No, no. I try not to do that. I probably could do that. I try to drink a ton of water during the school day.
There you go. Go.
Yeah. I always have one with lunch though. And it's like, oh, like sweet nectar.
See, and that's how I am with coffee. So okay. No, all right. Fair enough. Number two, who is a go-to musical artist or group?
The Beatles.
Yeah.
Always. Mom was a huge Beatles fan growing up in the 60s. And when the anthology series came out, she was like, you're watching this with me. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, oh, I'm super into that. I don't know what it was about it, but I was like hooked, like hardcore, like owned all the albums. Like my bedroom's decorated with Beatles posters. So from like whenever that came out, I was like in middle school or something. Yeah. But yeah, absolutely. I've seen Paul McCartney twice.
Oh, okay.
Just absolutely love the Beatles.
Yeah, they're good. I can't deny that. They are absolutely great. I listen to them too. I wouldn't say they're a go-to for me, but we have Sirius XM in our one car, and there's a Beatles channel on there, and that's one of our presets. And I'll just flip through that every once in a while.
Because like no matter what you're in the mood for, there's a Beatles like
there is
so many like iterations or like so many different I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but you can always find something.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Number 3. What movie can you watch over and over again and it never gets old?
The Harry Potter movies.
Really?
Any of the Harry
Okay.
Potters. Yeah, I love the books.
Mhm.
And so I just really love all those movies.
Okay. Okay.
Two, not as much. Two, not as much, but most of them, yes. Anytime, like, yeah, that's like a comfort movie.
There you go. There you go. All right. What's the last thing that you read?
What is the last thing that I read? So actually, let me look at my Goodreads here because I can't remember. I'm a huge reader. But what was the last book I read? Oh, The Midnight Library.
Okay.
The Midnight Library.
Yeah.
It was a fictional book. It was okay. But yeah, that was the last one I read. I have a reading goal for myself, so I am going to read 45 books this year, and that was like number 20.
Is that normal for you? Like every year you try to reach that same number, or do you like ratchet it up every year?
I've been ratcheting it up.
Whoa.
Because I need to read more than I like play on social media, and I love to read. So I'm like, if I have that goal, it's like, oh, like, and it's like Sam, my husband calls it like the gamification, right? So it shows me like, oh, you're 2 books ahead of your goal. Like, okay, like let's, so it helps me to just kind of like keep myself in line.
Now, is that all fiction, or do you read a mix of fiction and nonfiction? Or
I love all kinds of different things. One of the books that I recently read that I loved was called Hill Women. It was about women in Appalachia.
Ooh, okay.
So it's about a woman from Appalachia, and she talks about her family and, how she was raised and how she kind of went a different way than her family. So it was just it was fascinating. But yeah, I love a good nonfiction.
Yeah. Good. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. This is going to be a weird question because we just got done talking about this, but I ask everybody. So what is your favorite pizza topping?
Well, it was always pepperoni and mushroom. That was the standard. But you get a little tired of that when you have access to pizza all the time.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, how often a week are you having pizza? Like, do you go down to the restaurant, or is it, that's work, it's separate? And
so I'll go in. I don't eat that much pizza, honestly, because you just get tired of it. I know that's like a terrible, people are, what? But if you own one, like, but I'll go in every once in a while. Like Sam will ask me like, oh, can you bring this thing down or whatever? And we also love to host people. So like when people come into town, or family comes in, we host people all the time. And so are my friends or his friends or whatever. So, I also love pesto with sausage and mushroom. Our pesto is really good. So those are probably like my 2 like go-tos.
Sounds good. All right. 6, laying on the beach or going for a hike?
Oh, on the beach. On the beach. It's just like hike. I love to hike too, but laying on the beach is just so relaxing. All
right. Here's an honest question. Where I grew up in southeastern Pennsylvania, the beach was always only like an hour and a half, 2 hours away, and you were at the ocean, either Jersey Shore or the Maryland Shore.
Go down the shore.
Right. Go down to the shore. But Midwest, you grew up, you spent the majority of your life in the Midwest. What's that mean for the Midwest? Is that the Great Lakes? Like we're going to the beach at the Great Lakes, or like,
we're going to Florida.
Oh, Florida.
Everybody goes to Florida. Mm-hmm. Like Florida or like Myrtle Beach.
But will they do that in the summer like we do in the East here? Or is it like they do that in the winter to escape the Midwest winter?
Both.
Okay.
So you have a lot of like snowbirds.
Uh-huh.
Right? Like older folks that like in the wintertime they go. My mother-in-law actually lives in Sarasota, which is a reason that we go fairly often. Okay. But yeah, people go to the beach in the summer big time.
So in the Midwest, if they say we're going to the beach, they're going like to the like the Gulf Coast or the Southern Atlantic or whatever. That's crazy. Okay. Okay.
And there are beaches like on like Lake Michigan, Lake Erie, not so much, but Lake Michigan, there are like legit, like really nice beaches, but I think maybe that's like not far enough away for people, or it's not like exotic enough, or it's not like the beach.
It's not salt water, right?
Yeah. So, but yeah, if we're going to the beach, it's typically Florida or.
I often wondered about that. Okay. All right. All right. Hugh, you said that you enjoy hosting people. So you've invited me for dinner. What are you making?
We are going to Fireside, Doug.
Awesome. Let Sam do all the cooking.
Yeah. So it's either that or Sam's. Yeah, I mean, I don't really cook. So I'm going to lean on my resources here.
Right.
You sound so excited about the pizza. So I feel like that would just be the best thing. But if you are coming to my house and we're having dinner, Sam and I are probably making tacos.
It's just as good as pizza, in my opinion. All right. Sounds good.
Yep.
All right. What's something, I mean, from everything that I get from our conversation tonight, you are a very bold person. You're not afraid to get into things. You're not afraid to take challenges. But is there something you're afraid of?
Oh, all kinds of stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Right?
Right?
Like if you want to get real deep, like people I love dying, you know?
Yeah.
Also like spiders. Oh yeah.
We were, my wife and I were digging our potatoes out of the garden today. And both of us are pretty strong-willed in that sense of like creepy crawly things don't really bother us. I mean, I grew up watching my grandparents smash bugs with their thumbs, it's like, that was like no big thing. It's like, oh, just kill it, but we were out and there was a horsefly and this thing was like, for whatever reason, attracted to both of us today. And both of us acted like this thing was going to kill us. And like we ran, like my wife like ran out of the garden. And then I was like, it had bit me on the back and I ran out too. And I'm thinking to myself, what are we doing? This is just a horsefly. But I know what you mean. You can go from, the death of a loved one to, something creepy crawly. Yeah, it's crazy. All right. Last question. What job other than your current one or one that you've had would you love to have?
I think I would like to be a baker.
Even though you don't like cooking, but baking is different.
No, I'm a baker though, Doug. I'm not a cook.
Okay.
I'm a baker. So I love to bake. And I really love like surprises and gifts and like that's like my love language, right? Is like giving people gifts and things like that. So I feel like if you were a baker in a bakery, like that's what you would be doing all the time, right? Is like helping people celebrate and people are always like happy when they come to the bakery. And I just think it would be really fun.
It probably would be really rewarding when you think about it. Yeah. Well,
and you get to eat a lot of cookies.
Yeah, right.
But I'd probably get sick of that too. So maybe it's not
right. Andrea, it has been an absolute pleasure. An honestly pleasure to be able to talk with you tonight and reconnect. Like I said, we're related, but we went years of our life without never really knowing each other because pre-internet days, you were out in the Midwest. I was here in Pennsylvania and it is what it is. But I'm glad that through social media, we've been able to reconnect here over the last couple of years. And this was a lot of fun. And I promise we will make it out to Cincinnati at some point. And I can't wait to. Well, absolutely. And when you ever find yourself moving, coming east for anything, swing on by. Absolutely.
Yes.
So thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. And it's been an absolute pleasure, Andrea.
Thank you, Doug. It's been so fun. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for listening to Doug's Front Porch, a conversational podcast with your host, Doug Maidenford. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to subscribe, rate, and give a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. 5 stars only, please. Follow along on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just look for Doug's Front Porch. Also, please feel free to tell all of your friends about the show, and I'll see you all next time on my front porch.